procedural issues around this. The Supreme Court didn't give a reason why they needed to act on this and allow the military to purge trans people from its ranks while the litigation is pending. So even if down the line the court finds that this policy violates the Constitution and unfairly targets and unconstitutionally targets trans people, the damage is done, right? That could be 3, 6 months, or even a year from now. The trans people are already going to be separated from the military, and it's going to be much, much harder for the government to reintegrate them. And then depending on how the case even comes out, there may not even really be an option, because they may just simply go back to the drawing board and redo the policy in a way that may pass constitutional muster, which is essentially what happened with the travel ban in the first administration. And similarly, the Supreme Court let the trans military ban go into effect in 2019. So this is not the first time the court has done so. And so what really worries me, though, is that this kind of shadow docket decision portends potentially what may be coming down the pike in terms of a case that they've already heard at the beginning of the term called Scrimetti, which dealt with a ban on gender affirming care for trans youth coming out of Tennessee. And the Supreme Court's due to rule on that by June. And the fundamental principle at play there is whether or not targeting trans people either as a class or on the basis of sex violates the Constitution under the Equal Protection Clause, and whether or not trans people on the basis of success, on the basis of sex or as a class, merit what's called heightened scrutiny, which is an exacting level of scrutiny by the courts. And basically, what this says to me is that potentially the courts or the Supreme Court might be already having decided Scrimetti and just is, ironing out the specific details, but basically is going to say that trans people are not protected on the basis of sex or on their own class status. And as a result, basically any of the policies that the Trump administration does targeting trans people could potentially pass constitutional muster by default.
How do you think trans people might be feeling in the military who have given their service for many, many years in some cases, to suddenly be segregated for their gender rather than anything to do with their ability to work, in active duty?
Yeah, I'm not going to sugarcoat it. I mean, the insult to their service is just abhorrent. I don't even know how I can even put it into words. I mean, to come from a president who notoriously is a draft dodger, and had bone spurs to get out of military service, to kick out people who have dedicated oftentimes decades of their lives to serving this country admirably, it's beyond an insult. And then also coming from this defense secretary who is just endangering national security, including his wife on Signal chats, had substantial issues with alcoholism and substance abuse. And, I think it's the biggest insult on top of everything, in the fact that these two dishonorable people are telling honorable trans military members that they can no longer serve by virtue of who they are.
Pete Hegseth posted on X on Tuesday, no more dudes in dresses, we're done with that shit.
I mean, that's literally the exact type of animus that the district court found was exactly motivating this. It's not about readiness. It's not about morale or anything else. It's literally about a hatred of trans people and wanting to eradicate us from society. And essentially the Supreme Court seems to be on board with that project and that political project of eradication. And, I think that in particular, also centers the issue of trans misogyny. This is all focused on trans women, but trans men are also serving in the military. And most of the time, they aren't as visible in this debate, but like they're also being affected by this.
Cis women are also the next on the chopping block as far as Pete Hegseth is concerned. He doesn't believe that anybody that doesn't fit his mold for this kind of archetypal male war fighter, as he describes them, that's kind of where this is heading, isn't it?
Exactly. I mean, he during his confirmation hearings, they were asking him about this, and he tried to walk it back, but it's very clear he doesn't believe women should be serving in the military. And if it wasn't for the fact that the Don't Ask, Don't Tell policy was repealed through Congress, I wouldn't be surprised if he tried to reenact a Don't Ask, Don't Tell policy, or just a full-on ban of gay folks in the military overall. And I think one of the other policies that went overlooked in the first Trump administration was this deployment readiness test that was also purging the military of people with HIV. And and so that's another disproportionate. Basically, anyone that doesn't fit this like white Christian male, straight Christian male, like mold is essentially should be pushed out of the military. And it obviously ending all of the diversity programs and everything else. I mean, they purged all of these books out of the military academies, but they kept Mein Kampf. Like, it's very clear, like, what this is about. It's about white supremacy more than anything.
And Nazism, we should say that out loud too. So much of this goes back to Project 2025. All this stuff was written and listed in this mandate for leadership. And this far-right Christian nationalist movement, they're all buying into it. But it seems that the Supreme Court is baked into that too. I mean, we know that the court obviously is packed and stacked with people who are in the tank for Trump, but they're also in the tank for white supremacy. I mean, even Clarence Thomas, it seems.
Yeah, very much so. I mean, it goes back to the Students for Fair Admission case, but even goes back before that to the Shelby County case, gutting the Voting Rights Act. Like, this has been a court that has been steadily and methodically eroding the fundamental protections that were won during the Civil Rights era. The Voting Rights Act, the Civil Rights Act, all of these things that have been enshrined into law for decades, they have been consistently eroding them, and worse, turning them on their head, essentially saying that, no, the Civil Rights Act actually is requiring that you must ensure that a sufficient number of white people are in these positions, and that if you have too many people of color, it's evidence of de facto discrimination. I mean, that's essentially the kinds of arguments that they're making in the wake of for folks who don't know what the Students for Fair Admission case was. It was the case that against Harvard and University of North Carolina that gutted, and I don't even want to say affirmative action because it wasn't affirmative action. It was race conscious admissions, which is substantially different. It's where if all things being equal, like, you can take into account that maybe somebody is coming from a underprivileged racial background, and you could take that into account, like if they have identical SAT scores, identical grades, everything else, like, there'll be a preference, because otherwise, like, without that racial conscious decision making, it almost inevitably always falls towards the white person. But in the aftermath, when they started releasing some of the demographics of the students who have entered some of these elite universities in the aftermath, the org behind Students for Fair Admission, or the folks behind that, basically said some of these schools still aren't admitting, essentially, like, they're basically saying they weren't admitting enough white people. Like, there were still too many people of color getting in, so they think that they were still doing racial conscious admissions. And it was like very clear. It's like, wait, you're saying that, like, you expect that, people of color can't get in under a neutral system. And so they really always want to talk about meritocracy, but what they really mean is this idea that only white people merit admission into elite universities. I mean, that's fundamentally what they believe. I
heard Trump talking about him going into the flight deck of Air Force One and seeing this pilot who he said he was more handsome than Tom Cruise, and that kept talking about how perfect he was. because he referred to him as a perfect